How much can a man watch burn before he burns too? The air on Cygnus X1's moon tasted like ozone and hot metal. Plasma bolts, brilliant green and deadly, tore through the ruined city. They hissed past Leo Holt's head, melting ferrocrete into slag. He did not care. He was dragging his wife from the mangled wreckage of the command post. Her name was Alara Vance. She was the captain. She was everything. Her environmental suit was shredded. A jagged piece of alien metal, dark and oily, was buried in her side. He pressed his armored gauntlet against the wound, but the red soaked through the seals, staining his hand. Her breath was a shallow rasp over their private comms channel, a sound that cut him deeper than any weapon. The Vex had hit the command post directly. It was not a random shot in the chaos of battle. It was a clean, targeted strike. Leo risked a glance at the sky, a bruised purple canvas choked with smoke and fire. For just a second, he saw it, a silhouette against the burning atmosphere. It was a Vex, but bigger, its frame wider and taller than the standard infantry. Its armor was decorated with trophies, not metal, but bone. The Collector. The alien warlord watched them, a predator observing its kill, before it turned and disappeared back into the swirling smoke. Medivac was on its way. He could hear the distant whine of its engines, but the sky was full of enemy fighters. It was a long way off. Leo gently lowered Alara, cradling her head in his lap. The hard ground seemed to disappear. There was only her. "Stay with me, Alara," he begged, his voice a raw tear in the fabric of the battle. Her eyes opened. They were clear, an ocean of calm in a storm of pain. She looked past his face, into him. She saw the cold fire starting to burn there, the promise of a terrible vengeance that would cross stars and burn down worlds. She knew him. She knew what this would make him. She reached up, her gloved fingers weak against the side of his helmet. A whisper, laced with static and effort, came over the comms. It was for him alone. "Leo, I'm fine. Win the war." Then her eyes closed, and her hand fell away. Leo did not scream. He did not break. A switch was flipped inside his soul, turning grief to ice and shock to iron. He felt the vibrations as the Medivac shuttle finally landed, its ramp slamming down. Medics rushed toward them. He stood up, a slow, deliberate movement. He turned his back on Alara as they loaded her onto the stretcher, unable to watch. His squad found him there. The Cubs, Nash, Cole, and Maya. They stood by him, their weapons held low, their helmets turning to follow his gaze into the smoke-choked horizon. They saw the new emptiness in his eyes. They saw the hard line of his jaw. He said nothing. He just raised his arm and uploaded a file directly to their helmet displays. The Collector's doctrinal profile, its tactics, its known locations, its gruesome calling cards, a gallery of horrors displayed on their internal screens. No orders were given. None were needed. The war for humanity could wait. Their war had just begun. Weeks turned to static and ration packs. Officially, Leo Holt and the Cubs were missing in action, presumed lost. In reality, they were ghosts hunting a demon deep in Vex territory. High Command had ordered all forces to pull back, to form a defensive line around the Sol system. The order was a faint noise from a world away. Leo had deleted it. His war was here. They moved through a petrified forest on a world the Vex had scoured with orbital fire. The trees were black, skeletal fingers clawing at a silent gray sky. The ground was a soft carpet of ash that muffled their footsteps. This was one of the Collector's known hunting grounds. "Leo, stop." Nash's voice was a low hum in their helmets. "I'm getting something." They knelt in the ash, forming a tight circle. On Nash's wrist-mounted console, a signal pulsed erratically. It was a Vex energy signature, but it was dirty. Layered. Underneath the alien protocol, a faint, corrupted ghost of a human medical transponder echoed. "It's a trail," Maya said, her voice tight. They followed it. The signal led them to a deep, jagged canyon, a wound in the planet's surface. As they descended, the smell hit them. A coppery chemical tang that stuck in the throat. The source of the signal was at the bottom. It was not one source. It was dozens. They were human soldiers, captured Marines. They were not just dead. They were displayed, posed like statues in a grotesque gallery. One Marine was on his knees, head in his hands in a perfect sculpture of despair. Another was reaching for a rifle just beyond her fingertips, her body frozen in eternal, hopeless effort. Some kind of alien technology held them in place, preserving the flesh and the agony. It was the collector's art. Leo's hand tightened into a fist inside his gauntlet. A cold sickness coiled in his gut, but the fire inside him burned it away. This was not a warrior. This was a sickness that needed to be cleansed from the galaxy. As Nash began documenting the horror, proximity alarms shrieked through their HUDs. A high-pitched, urgent warning. Ambush. Vex infantry poured down the canyon walls, a tide of clicking metal and glowing red eyes. The Cubs did not need an order. They were a single organism. They moved and fired with brutal, practiced efficiency. Cole laid down a wall of suppressive fire. Maya flanked left, her pulse rifle cutting down targets with cold precision. Leo and Nash held the center. They were outnumbered 50-1, but they fought with a ferocity the Vex did not understand. A heavy lancer appeared on a ridge above, its twin cannons glowing as they charged. It took aim at Cole, who was pinned behind a shard of rock. There was no time. Leo abandoned his cover. He sprinted across open ground, the world narrowing to the space between him and his man. He slammed into Cole, tackling him into a shallow ditch. A fraction of a second later, a bolt of white-hot plasma turned the rock they were behind into molten soup. They fought their way out of the trap, but the cost was high. Their small transport was a smoking crater. Their supplies were scattered and destroyed. As the last Vex fighter retreated into the gray sky, they stood alone, stranded. Then a single sharp beep came from Nash's console. It was not a Vex signal. It was a tight beam transmission, heavily encrypted. An old code, one Alara had used for her most secret intelligence contacts. A data packet downloaded. Below it, a single line of text appeared. 5 words that changed everything. It's not just hunting. It's learning. Find the lab. The data packet was a ghost key. It unlocked a path to a single point in a forgotten asteroid belt, a dead rock that was once a human mining station. Their salvaged scout ship, running on fumes and prayer, drifted toward it in silence. Life support readings were 0. Power signatures were flat. But as they got closer, Nash picked it up, a low, deep hum shielded from standard scans. The station was not dead. They did not dock. A grand assault was not their way anymore. They were 4 ghosts, slipping from the airlock and using their mag boots to crawl across the station's pockmarked hull. They found a maintenance vent, pried it open, and slid inside. The silence was worse than gunfire. It was a cold, sterile silence that soaked up sound. The corridors were clean, the white walls reflecting the beams from their weapon lights. There were no guards, no patrols, no sign of life. The air was recycled, tasting flat and old. This was not a military base. They followed the faint hum of power to its source. It led them to the station's core, to a vast circular chamber. And there, they saw the truth. This was a laboratory. The Collector was not just a warlord. It was a rogue Vex biologist. It had been taking prisoners not for trophies, but for research. It was studying the one thing it could not comprehend: human emotion, hope, despair, love. It believed the human soul was a tangible energy source, a chaotic but powerful weapon it could learn to synthesize and control. The soldiers in the canyon. They were not just a gallery of pain. They were data points, failed experiments. Leo saw it all now. The terrible, cold logic of it. Dozens of stasis pods lined the walls of the chamber. Some held humans, their faces frozen in silent screams. Others held things that were not quite human anymore. Twisted fusions of Vex technology and living flesh. Cole made a sick noise in his throat. Maya just stood frozen, her knuckles white on her rifle. In the exact center of the lab, one pod stood alone. It was active, glowing with a soft internal light. Leo moved toward it, a cold dread pulling him forward, his feet feeling like lead. A human figure floated in the shimmering geol inside, wires and delicate probes connected to her skull. The face was pale, peaceful, and achingly familiar. It was Alara. She was not dead. She was here. She was the main subject. The collector had kept her alive, locked in a neural loop. It had been replaying the moment of her injury on the moon, endlessly analyzing her resolve, her stoicism, her whisper. "I'm fine." It was the purest sample of human spirit the monster had ever found. The fire of vengeance in Leo's chest turned to ash. The hunt had been a lie. He had not been tracking his wife's killer. He had been a dog on a leash, and his rage had led the monster right back to its most precious prize. A heavy metallic thud echoed through the chamber. The massive blast door slid shut, sealing them inside. The clean white lights snapped off, replaced by a deep blood-red emergency glow that painted the pods in hellish color. A voice echoed from hidden speakers. It was synthesized, guttural, and filled with a cold alien curiosity. "Subject Alpha has arrived. The pack is complete. The final experiment may now begin." The collector descended from a platform hidden in the shadows above. It was a walking nightmare, a fusion of Vex armor and pulsing, grotesque biology. It moved with an unnatural grace for its size, its heavy footfalls silent on the metal deck. In one clawed hand, it held a small device, a neural remote covered in alien script. "Your bond!" the collector rasped, its voice a discordant chorus of clicks and synthesized tones. "It is the key, stronger than any I have found." It gestured with the remote toward Alara's pod. "She endures for you. She believes you will win the war." A beautiful, pointless hope. It pressed a control. A low hiss filled the lab as the other stasis pods opened. The human soldiers inside began to stir, then awaken. They screamed, but it was not a sound of release. It was a sound of possession. Their eyes, wide with terror, glowed with a faint, sickly red light. The collector had turned them into puppets. They shambled forward, their movements jerky and unnatural. They were armed with tools from the lab, sharpened pieces of metal, heavy wrenches. The cubs raised their rifles. "Hold fire!" Leo yelled. "Non-lethal only. Disable them. Do not kill them." The lab dissolved into chaos. It was a heart-wrenching battle against their own kind. Cole used the butt of his rifle to knock a soldier down. Maya fired stun rounds, her face a mask of conflict. They were Marines trained to kill the enemy, and now they were fighting to save the victims. In the middle of the desperate struggle, a new transmission cut through their private comms. It was a human signal, crisp and clear, overriding the station's jamming. An admiral's insignia flashed on their HUDs. "Leo Holt, stand down." The voice was sharp, authoritarian, and shockingly familiar. "We know about the collector's research. We know about Alara Vance." Leo froze. A mind-controlled soldier's attack glancing off his armor. The admiral's voice was as cold as deep space. "Your wife's sacrifice was deemed necessary. The collector's work on weaponizing emotion is vital to the war effort. We have been feeding it data for months. We allowed its attack on your command post. We needed the purest possible sample. Your unsanctioned mission has jeopardized everything. Surrender the lab, and we may yet salvage this." The words hit Leo like a physical blow. Betrayal. Absolute and total. His command had sold her. They had sold them all. His righteous war was a lie, a script written by his own superiors. The collector let out a grating metallic laugh. It had been listening. It pointed the neural remote directly at Leo. "No," it said, the alien voice dripping with discovery. "This bond will not be salvaged. It will be perfected." The remote glowed. A searing, white-hot agony erupted in Leo's mind. It felt like his skull was being ripped open as the collector tried to seize the one thing that was still his. His connection to her. The pain was absolute. The collector was in his head, using his own memories as a weapon. He saw Alara's smile. He felt her touch. He heard her laugh. The alien twisted each memory, turning love into a tool of agony. It was trying to break him, to peel back the layers of his soul and find the source of his strength. But through the storm of manufactured pain, he heard her real voice, the static-laced whisper from the moon. Win the war. It was not a memory. It was a command. And his war was not some distant fight for territory. It was here. It was now. With a primal roar that came from his very core, Leo pushed back. He focused on his love for her, not as a weakness, but as a shield. A fire. He slammed a mental door on the intruder. The neural feedback shrieked, a piercing electronic scream. The collector staggered back, its optical sensors flickering, its connection severed. Leo gasped for air, his head pounding. Time was gone. There was only one ending now. Nash, overload the asteroid's primary reactor. Now, he commanded, his voice raw. Maya, Cole, get the prisoners to the emergency shuttle, all of them. They hesitated, their faces torn with loyalty. To leave him was unthinkable. That's an order, Cubs, go, he roared. This time they moved. Nash sprinted for a control panel while Maya and Cole began herding the dazed, freed soldiers toward the hangar bay. Leo turned to the collector. He was no longer a soldier following orders. He was something older, a protector. He dropped his pulse rifle. It clattered on the deck. He pulled his combat knife and a small magnetic demolition charge from his belt. You wanted to study human emotion, Leo said, his voice dangerously calm. He stalked forward, a hunter with nothing left to lose. Let's start with rage. The final fight was not a battle of tactics. It was brutal and close. The collector was stronger, its armored frame deflecting Leo's knife. But Leo was a phantom of fury. He was faster, more desperate, fueled by a love the alien could only observe. He weaved under its sweeping claws, slicing at exposed cables and hydraulic joints. He saw his opening and slammed the demo charge onto the collector's chest, right over its central power core. The collector swatted him away, but the charge was armed. Then, it lunged, impaling him with a long, bladed appendage. It lifted him off the ground, pinning him like an insect. Pain, real and final, flooded his system. Leo grinned, blood filling his mouth. You took everything. He coughed, looking the monster in its cold alien eyes. He lifted his wrist, his hand trembling, and pressed the detonator. The explosion was not large, but it was focused. It blew the collector apart from the inside. Leo collapsed to the floor, his body broken. His helmet display was failing, the world turning to red static. Through the flickering screen, he could see the Cubs getting the last of the prisoners onto their shuttle. He saw Maya turn back, her posture a silent scream. He gave a slight final shake of his head. Go. As the reactor overload alarm blared, a piercing final sound, he used his last strength to crawl toward Alara's pod. The glass was cracked from the blast. He placed his bloody, gloved hand against it. On his private comm, his voice a bare whisper, he transmitted one last time, a prayer into the void. I'm fine, Alara. The Cubs are safe. The asteroid station erupted in a silent, brilliant flash of white light, a new temporary star in the endless dark.